The body will tell its story if we're tuned into it and we're prepared to listen. It will be very difficult for those people to have an opinion, to express an opinion. They're much more likely to be people pleasers. Bodies are brilliant to work with. It's just that we're not really taught how to do that. We're only taught how to think. They'll sense it before someone even says it. That's just the way that our body is. That's just the way that we react. That's always a big red flag to me. Hello everybody, I'm Catriona Morten. I'm a sensory-motor psychotherapist. And today I'd like to talk to you about how trauma shows up in the body. But before I jump into that, if you're enjoying these videos, then please give us a like and subscribe to our channel, because it really helps us get our message out there to loads more of you. All the experiences we have going through life, especially our very early experiences, they have a dramatic impact on us. When we're little, it's much easier to get overwhelmed because we're small, we're defenseless, we can't fight, we can't flight, we can only freeze or fawn. And I get a lot of people that come to me and say, but nothing really terrible happened to me, everything was okay. A lot of the time they don't have much memory of their childhood. That's always a big red flag to me, because if everything was wonderful, we remember things because we have an emotional response to things. We don't remember the bland things, they just kind of all go by because we can't retain everything. And the things that we remember are because they've emotionally impacted on us, either in a really good way or a scary way or whatever it is. And we'll remember. When we're really little, pre-verbal, an awful lot of stuff will happen to us and we've got no memory of it because that part of our brain hasn't formed. But it doesn't mean that we haven't been affected by what's happened to us. And that is going to be 100% a felt body memory. It's going to have no images, no memories, no intrusive thoughts, no flashbacks with it. It's going to be a purely felt sense in the nervous system, in the body. Now, when we've had that and we've grown up with it, and it's just like breathing to us, that's just the way that our body is. That's just the way that we react. We don't give it a second thought. It's just us. Most of the people that I see, in fact, I'm going to say almost 100% of the people I see, have had developmental trauma. They've had things that have overwhelmed them when they were little. That's meant there's certain things that it just makes difficult, certain things that they notice that they can't do, or they're affected in a way that isn't helpful to them. They don't want that to happen. Like I've said in many other videos, sometimes traumas can emerge. They can be locked away in our amygdala and they can come up. Something can just kind of shake it loose, nudge it, poke it, and suddenly things aren't the way that they used to be and life is more difficult. When those things don't resolve, when they don't shift, then good chance it's something that maybe you need to see a trauma therapist about, to help it process, to help it move through, to help it heal, whatever's needed. Your body will let you know what that is. There are so many different things that can impact us. And the people that I see, it's not been one particular thing. For some people, yes, it's abuse, physical, sexual, emotional abuse, it's neglect. For some people, it's been being brought up in an incredibly strict environment. And I just want to kind of focus in on one of those things so that I can kind of put a bit more meat on the bones, a bit more context to it, rather than just be general. Yes, it can be all of those things. But if we just look at what's it like if we grow up in a really strict environment where there are certain expectations, there are rules that have to be obeyed. Now, for some people, those rules are very explicit. We don't do that. That's not allowed. You're not allowed to get angry, or that you have to really follow strict rules or there'll be punishment. For some people, these rules can change. They're unspoken. We're just supposed to know what they are. We get told when we break them, but we might not even be aware of what it is that we've done. And if it's really inconsistent, it can be okay to do something one day and not the next. That creates incredible uncertainty. And what those children can end up doing is really withdrawing into themselves. If this outside environment with everything in it, people in it, becomes a place that we have to be wary of. If I put a wrong foot, if I say the wrong thing, if I show up in a way that's unacceptable, then I'm going to get into trouble. I'm going to get shamed, told off, humiliated. And children don't want that. And so they learn to keep everything in, to be very small, very quiet, not really feel free at expressing themselves. They also get really good at assessing their environment, having their little kind of spidey senses, their hypervigilance, really switched on, so that they're trying to second guess all the time what's expected of me, what's the right answer, what's going to get me praise instead of trouble. And if that is like a consistent thing, it's there all the time, then those children learn, one, not to relax, secondly, not to pay any attention to themselves, to put all their attention on the external environment, on reading people, on trying to second guess what's the right thing to do. And, children have amazing senses because they can't really work things out. So they sense an awful lot, but they're not aware that they're doing it. And all those experiences, they actually have a massive physical impact on us. And the coping mechanisms and the protective mechanisms that we develop completely unconsciously, they just become our way of doing things. If things are expected of us, then we learn to put all our own feelings, all our own needs to one side and give what's needed. Now, a lot of people use this term masking, and it's quite a good description of giving the appearance of what's expected, but having a completely different internal experience. And growing up, that can look like not feeling safe or free to express ourselves. Our body actually, it's almost like it develops this kind of force field around it that stops us expanding into it. And that can be with movement, with opinions, with how loud we are, our expression of emotions. When we move out of an environment, those things get hardwired into us and they don't just change. And all of those wounds and all of those ways of having to be, I'm just using a critical environment as an example, then we learn to really keep it in, keep everything suppressed, disconnect from our emotions if it's really difficult to kind of control them, not be aware of ourselves. And those people, as they grow up, can find it really difficult to have a sense of themselves, who they really are. It will be very difficult for those people to have an opinion, to express an opinion. They're much more likely to be people pleasers because they're really good at reading what is the kind of tone of the room and what's expected of them. They'll sense it before someone even says it. And I know that when I'm sitting with someone, when I know that they've got these brilliant spidey senses, because when my body and my nervous system is really tuned into theirs, and I'm really stopping thinking and I'm more just listening and really paying attention to sometimes very subtle little movements, sometimes not so subtle movements. If I think, well, I wonder what it would be like, for instance, if you're really, really closed in and tight, I wonder what it would be like to extend an arm outside of your boundary, and the boundary might be the edges of the chair that they're keeping themselves in. Before I've even said what about, I will often see that person either contract or pull away, look down. It's like, oh, that's amazing. You're hypervigilant, your spidey senses actually knew what I was going to suggest. They read me and all those little signs that I wasn't even aware of before I spoke those words. And it happens time and time again. It's a very real thing. It's really good when something like that does happen. Then I always name it and say, oh, I'm just going to let that little part of you know that I've just seen it. And I'm trying to give all these different parts, all these movements and those hardwired in coping mechanisms. I'm trying to give them validation, acceptance. They're all welcome. Nothing's ever going to be judged as wrong. It's like the opposite experience of, what do you think you're doing? It's like, oh, I can see what you're doing, and that's really interesting. The body will tell its story if we're tuned into it and we're prepared to listen and really take note of what it's doing, because it can absolutely help us make sense. If we have a vague idea of what our childhood was like, but we can't know what our care was like that we were given when we were little. You know, I have a lot of clients that have maybe been adopted, or there's been a massive rupture. Well, if that happens at a young age, then every single thing that we need for consistency is suddenly changed and different. Now, that's going to be an overwhelming and therefore traumatic experience. Even though we haven't got any memory and it's like, oh, everything was fine and, you know, the baby grew up and it was okay, that person might be really, really susceptible to change and unexpected things happening because they've had that lived experience of everything changing, smells, touch, presence, nothing staying the same. So those people will be very, very hypersensitive to anything changing, and it will set the nervous system off. The brilliant thing is it doesn't matter what our early experiences are. We can help us make sense of what's happened because of the way that the body's doing. The body doesn't just make things up. So I wonder what that could have been a defense against, or I wonder what that could have been a really good coping mechanism and response to. When we can see what the body's doing, really allow it to tell its story, put the narrative onto it of what it seems your body's doing, what it looks like, does it feel like that on the inside? If that matches, then we can start to put some pieces of that jigsaw puzzle in place. When we can learn to read the body, then instead of it just making our life difficult and we're not able to show up and express ourselves and stand our ground or put a boundary in place, or there's a really good reason for that. And it isn't about, you know, just forcing through and finding a way to do that. When we can heal those early wounds, and the body will let us know what those wounds are, then often we don't need to do that kind of forcing of something. It can just happen naturally because the thing that was preventing it, that was pulling it back, isn't there anymore. And so we just become a lot freer and we'll just be more expressive and more expansive. A lot of people, when they recover from trauma, they'll say, oh, I didn't notice anything kind of changing. I just noticed that I was doing this and it felt so natural and so easy. That's exactly how it should be, especially when it's been young, early trauma. It won't come under any category of PTSD because there'll be no flashbacks with it, but it's body memory. It will be felt in the body and it's very, very real, and it's way, way, way more common than, certainly for the people that come to see me, than people with intrusive thoughts and flashbacks. But it's like, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. It does if you put a trauma angle on it. Something's going off in your amygdala, this is happening in your body, and it will be consistent. That's another thing about trauma. It's never really random, it's consistent. So it becomes a lot easier to spot and to kind of be able to follow its patterns and make sense of it. And bodies are brilliant to work with. It's just that we're not really taught how to do that. We're only taught how to think, which is a terrible shame because this gives you so much more in terms of being able to read situations, make decisions, and also it's where you have to regulate. You've got to regulate this. And so the more you know about it, the more you can understand it, the easier that's going to be. as to what bits are that you need to regulate your particular body with your particular traumas based on your particular life experiences and events. We're all different. One size does not fit all. So I hope that helps make sense of some things. I hope it just lights up some little light bulbs in people's heads and helps them join the dots and make sense of things. If it does, if you're enjoying these videos, then again, please give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye!